A man stands in federal district court wearing clothes that smell of 3 weeks on the street. Judge Marcus Thornhill is laughing, not politely, but with his whole body, one meaty hand slapping the mahogany bench hard enough to make the gavel jump. The gallery mirrors his amusement. Phones are out. A woman in the third row is actually crying from laughter. The bailiff, Officer Rodriguez, has his arms crossed, grinning like he's watching the best comedy show of his career. The defendant hasn't moved. His posture is strange. Back too straight, shoulders too square, hands resting at his sides in a way that suggests discipline rather than defeat. His beard is matted. His jacket has holes. His boots are held together with duct tape. But his eyes are locked on Judge Thornhill with the kind of focus that makes certain people deeply uncomfortable once they notice it. 10,000 troops, the judge repeats, barely able to get the words out between gasps of laughter. You commanded 10,000. I'm sorry, Another wave of laughter rolls through the courtroom. Sir, you can't even command respect for basic hygiene. The homeless man's lips move, speaking words the camera can't capture, his expression carved from granite. But what led to this moment? How did Jonathan Reese end up here, standing in shackles while a federal judge mocked the most significant accomplishment of his life? 72 hours earlier, Jonathan Reese was sleeping behind a dumpster in an alley off 7th Street, when 4 federal marshals surrounded him with weapons drawn. They'd been tracking him for 6 days, ever since a facial recognition hit flagged him at a bus station in Tucson. The system identified him as a person of interest in a domestic terrorism investigation. The file was 14 pages long and completely fabricated. Hands where we can see them, now! Reese opened his eyes without flinching, without gasping, just opened them like he'd been awake the whole time. He sat up slowly, hands visible, empty. Gentlemen, he said, his voice carrying the kind of calm that made the lead marshal, a man named Cortez, grip his weapon tighter. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit acts of domestic terrorism and assaulting a federal officer in Arizona. I've never been to Arizona, Reese said quietly. Shut your mouth. Face down, hands behind your back. Reese complied. The asphalt was still warm from the day's sun, smelling like rotting food and motor oil. He'd slept in worse places. Afghanistan had taught him that comfort was a luxury, not a requirement. So had Somalia. And Syria. Though Syria was supposed to be classified, Marshal Cortez pressed a knee into Reese's back. Harder than necessary, harder than procedure required. You think you're tough? You think living on the street makes you hard? Reese said nothing. That's when Marshal Devin Pritchard made his first mistake. Pritchard was 27, 2 years on the job, still trying to prove something to everyone around him. He saw the target was subdued and decided to add his own touch. He kicked Reese in the ribs. Not hard enough to break anything. Hard enough to hurt. Hard enough to send a message about who held power in this transaction. Reese's body absorbed the impact without a sound. How's that feel, homeless? Pritchard grinned, looking at his colleagues for approval. The other marshals shifted uncomfortably. Cortez's expression hardened. Pritchard, step back! But Pritchard didn't step back. He kicked again. This time in the kidney. And that's when Jonathan Reese made a decision that would change everything. His hands, which had been cuffed behind his back, snapped the plastic flex ties like thread. The sound was a sharp crack that made all 4 marshals freeze for a quarter second, which was 3/4 of a second too long. Reese pivoted on his hip, his legs sweeping Pritchard's feet out from under him with precision that spoke of thousands of hours of training. The marshal went down hard, his head bouncing off the pavement. Before Cortez could aim his weapon, Reese was on his feet, inside the marshal's reach, controlling the firearm with one hand while his other delivered a strike to the solar plexus that emptied Cortez's lungs in one explosive gasp. The third marshal, a woman named Torres, was good, better than her colleagues. She created distance, drew her sidearm smoothly, her training evident in every movement. But Reese was already moving, using Cortez as a shield, backing toward the mouth of the alley where the geometry would work in his favor. Torres couldn't get a clean shot without risking her fellow marshal. Pritchard scrambled up, rage replacing caution, his face red with humiliation and anger. He charged without thinking, without strategy, pure emotion driving him forward. Reese sidestepped with minimal movement, grabbed Pritchard's tactical vest with both hands, and redirected his momentum into the driver's side window of the marshal's parked SUV. The glass exploded in a shower of crystalline fragments. Pritchard's body went halfway through before sliding back to the pavement, semi-conscious, bleeding from a dozen cuts across his face and arms. Reese could have run. The alley opened to a maze of side streets he knew better than these federal agents knew their own procedures. He could vanish into the city's infrastructure, disappear into the population of invisible people who move through urban spaces without leaving traces. He'd done it before. He could do it again. Instead, he stopped, turned around. He stopped, raised his hands in clear surrender. "I'm done," he said, his voice level and calm. "Take me in." Torres kept her weapon trained on him, her hands shaking now with adrenaline and fear. "On the ground, face down, now!" Reese complied without hesitation. He went down slowly, deliberately, never making a move that could be misinterpreted as aggressive or threatening. He let them cuff him again. Real cuffs this time, steel, double-locked, checked twice. He let them shove him into the SUV with more force than necessary. He didn't resist when they added leg shackles at the federal detention center, treating him like he was the most dangerous man they'd ever arrested. But he also didn't speak. Not his name, not his story, nothing. The intake officer asked him 23 questions over the course of 40 minutes. Reese stared at the wall behind her and said nothing, his expression completely neutral, offering no information whatsoever. They fingerprinted him, no matches in the civilian system, which should have been the first red flag. They photographed him from multiple angles. They searched him thoroughly. In his pockets, they found exactly 3 items: $1.47 in change, a worn photograph of a woman and a young girl, and a small piece of metal that looked like some kind of military insignia or pendant. When the intake officer asked what it was, Reese spoke for the first time since his arrest. "You wouldn't understand." The officer, annoyed by his silence and now his cryptic response, dropped it into an evidence bag without further comment. Jonathan Reese had been homeless for 4 years, 7 months, and 18 days. Before that, he'd been a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, commanding officer of a forward operations base in Kandahar province that processed over 7,000 combat missions. Before that, he'd done 3 tours in Iraq, leading troops through some of the heaviest fighting of the insurgency. Before that, Somalia, where he'd learned that peacekeeping was often anything but peaceful. Before that, a decade of classified operations in places that never made the news, conducting missions that would never be acknowledged. He'd commanded, at his peak, responsibility for over 10,000 personnel across multiple bases, coordinating air support, ground operations, intelligence gathering, and humanitarian efforts across 3 provinces. He'd made decisions that saved lives and decisions that ended them, carrying the weight of command through firefights, political chaos, and impossible situations where every choice led to some kind of hell. His wife's name was Catherine. She died of ovarian cancer while he was on his 4th deployment, thousands of miles away in a desert that didn't care about his personal tragedy. He got the call on a satellite phone while standing in 118-degree heat outside a compound his team had just cleared of insurgents. The connection was terrible, cutting in and out. Her sister told him Catherine had held on for 3 days, refusing to let go, hoping he'd make it home in time to say goodbye. He didn't make it. By the time his emergency leave was processed and he reached the hospital, she'd been dead for 6 hours. His daughter's name was Emma. She was 11 when Catherine died, suddenly thrust into a world where her mother was gone, and her father was a ghost who appeared occasionally between deployments, trying to be present but never quite managing it. The Army gave him compassionate leave, 30 days to bury his wife, settle his affairs, and pretend he could put his life back together. He came home to find Emma living with his sister-in-law, sleeping in a room that still smelled like her mother's perfume. Barely speaking, barely eating, moving through the world like she was underwater. He had 27 days left on his leave when they called him back. A situation in Syria that required his specific expertise, his particular skill set that nobody else possessed. He told them no. They told him it wasn't optional. Lives were at stake, American lives, and his knowledge could make the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Emma cried when he left. Not sobbing, not theatrically, just silent tears running down her face as she watched him pack his duffel bag, knowing exactly what those preparations meant. "Dad, please don't go." "I have to, sweetheart. People are counting on me." "I'm counting on you." He went anyway, because that's what officers do. That's what he'd always done, choosing duty over family, mission over personal needs, the greater good over the individual cost. The Syria operation lasted 9 months instead of the promised 6 weeks, stretching longer as situations evolved and new priorities emerged. When he finally returned, Emma was living in a group home. His sister-in-law had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer and couldn't care for her anymore. The state had taken custody, temporary, they said, just until a family member could provide stable housing and consistent care. Reese was active duty military with unpredictable deployments and no fixed address beyond his base assignment. Not stable enough for a teenage girl who'd already lost her mother and was losing everything else. He requested early retirement, filling out the paperwork 3 times. They denied it 3 times, explaining that his skill set was too valuable, his knowledge too specific, his experience too rare. They needed him for one more operation. Then another. Then another. By the time they approved his retirement, Emma was 14 years old. She'd been in 4 different foster homes. The last one, according to the social worker's report, was adequate but not ideal, which was bureaucratic language for a place that met minimum standards without providing anything resembling love or stability. Emma had stopped asking when her father was coming home. He got custody back on a Tuesday in March. Picked her up from school on a Wednesday afternoon, standing outside the building with other parents who looked at him with suspicion. This older man in military uniform, too rigid, too formal, clearly uncomfortable in this civilian context. Emma sat in the passenger seat of his truck and stared out the window without speaking, her body angled away from him, every line of her posture communicating distance. At a red light, he tried to take her hand. She pulled away. "Emma, I know I wasn't there. I know I failed you, but I'm here now. I'm not leaving again." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were older than they should have been, carrying knowledge that children shouldn't possess. "You'll leave. You always leave." "Not anymore, I promise." "Your promises don't mean anything." She was right. His promises had never meant anything when measured against the weight of duty, of country, of the abstract moral calculus that told him his service saved more lives than it destroyed, that his sacrifice was necessary for the greater good. He lasted 18 months before the nightmares started eating him alive. The Department of Veterans Affairs prescribed him medication, pills that were supposed to help him sleep, that were supposed to quiet the screaming in his head. The medication made it hard to think, made his thoughts fuzzy and his reactions slow. He stopped taking it. The nightmares got worse, vivid and relentless, jerking him awake 3 or 4 times a night with his heart pounding and his sheets soaked with sweat. He started drinking instead, not heavily at first, just enough to quiet the screaming in his head when he closed his eyes, just enough to make sleep possible. Emma found him passed out on the couch one morning before school, an empty bottle on the floor beside him. She called 911 without hesitation. He woke up in the hospital with a psychiatrist explaining that he was experiencing severe PTSD and needed intensive treatment, possibly inpatient care. "I'm fine," he said. "Colonel Reese, you're not fine." "I'm fine." The treatment required 4 weeks inpatient at a VA facility. He refused, signing papers against medical advice, convinced he could handle it himself. Emma went back into foster care while he got stable. He never got stable. The drinking got worse. The nightmares never stopped. He lost his apartment when he couldn't make rent. Lost his truck when he missed payments. Lost contact with Emma. Not because the state prevented it, but because he couldn't bear to let her see what he'd become. couldn't face her knowing that he'd chosen this path, that every decision had led here. Back in the courtroom, Judge Thornhill is no longer laughing, but he's annoyed now, irritated that this homeless man won't simply admit guilt and accept whatever mercy the court deigns to offer. Mr. Doe, or whatever your real name is, this court is prepared to show leniency if you'll simply admit to the assault and show some remorse for your actions. Reese's voice is quiet but clear, carrying across the courtroom with perfect diction. I defended myself against an illegal assault by a federal officer. I used appropriate force to neutralize the threat. I then surrendered voluntarily to lawful custody. Appropriate force? Thornhill's face reddens, his professional composure slipping. You put a man through a car window. He kicked me twice while I was restrained and unarmed. I neutralized the threat without causing permanent injury. My response was proportional and controlled. The gallery murmurs, confused by this homeless man who speaks like a trained attorney, who uses military terminology with precision. Sarah Chen, the public defender, looks up for the first time, surprised her client can speak in complete sentences, can articulate a legal defense. Without causing permanent injury? You're lucky Marshal Pritchard didn't shoot you where you stood. With respect, Your Honor, luck had nothing to do with it. I maintained control of the situation throughout. The judge's expression shifts. There's something in Reese's tone. Not defiance exactly, but absolute certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from repetition, from training, from doing something so many times that it becomes reflex rather than conscious thought. Are you threatening federal officers in my courtroom? No, sir. I'm stating a fact. If Marshal Torres had fired her weapon, she would have missed. I ensured that through positioning and use of cover. Thornhill stares at him, trying to reconcile the homeless appearance with the precise military language, the confident analysis of tactical situations. The gallery has gone quiet, sensing that something has shifted, that this isn't funny anymore. Public Defender Chen, control your client. Sarah Chen stands awkwardly. Your Honor, my client has a right to remain silent, which he should exercise immediately before I add additional charges. I haven't raised my voice once, Your Honor. It's true, Reese hasn't. Every word has been delivered in the same level, calm tone. The voice of someone briefing superiors, someone accustomed to speaking to power without apology or fear. Thornhill's jaw clenches. He's not used to being challenged, especially not by someone who looks like they crawled out of a storm drain, who smells like they haven't showered in weeks. Let me make something very clear to you. I don't care what delusions you're living under. I don't care what voices you hear or what fantasies you've constructed to make sense of your pathetic existence. You assaulted a federal officer. You're going to prison. The only question is for how long? I commanded 10,000 troops, Reese says simply. The courtroom erupts in laughter again, but this time it's meaner, harder, crueler. Someone in the back yells, "And I'm Batman!" Another voice adds, "I'm Napoleon!" The mockery builds on itself, people feeding off each other's amusement. Judge Thornhill slaps the bench again, genuinely entertained now. 10,000 troops! Of course you did. And I'm sure you have a Medal of Honor hidden in your sock, right? Maybe you personally killed bin Laden? Reese doesn't react to the mockery, doesn't change expression. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm stating it as fact for the record. Well, your fact is noted and dismissed. Now, I have a battalion commander's insignia that can be verified. My fingerprints should have flagged in the Department of Defense system. And there are approximately 247 living soldiers who served under my direct command who can verify my identity and service record. Sarah Chen is scribbling notes now, her mind racing through possibilities. This is either the most elaborate delusion she's ever encountered in 5 years of public defense work, or something is very wrong with this case. Something fundamental that she's missed. Thornhill waves dismissively, but there's a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes now. Marshal Rodriguez, remove this man's personal effects from evidence and bring them here. I want to see this commander's insignia he's so proud of. 3 minutes later, Rodriguez returns with a sealed evidence bag. He hands it to the judge with a strange expression on his face, like he's just realized something doesn't add up. Thornhill opens it, pulls out the small piece of metal, holds it up to the light. His expression doesn't change, but something flickers behind his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first whisper of recognition that he might be wrong about something fundamental. This proves nothing. You could have bought this at any military surplus store for $20. The serial number on the back corresponds to my commission date. It can be verified through Fort Benning's records office. And I'm sure you have the number memorized. November 17th, 1994. Serial number 77392. Issued to First Lieutenant Jonathan Michael Reese upon completion of Officer Candidate School, Class 94-004. The specificity stops the room cold. Those aren't the kinds of details you invent on the spot. Aren't the kind of fabrication a homeless man creates to get sympathy. Sarah Chen stands again. Your Honor, I'd like to request a continuance to investigate my client's claims. If there's any possibility that... Sit down, counselor. There's no possibility. This man is a vagrant who assaulted a federal officer and is now attempting to manipulate this court with fabricated military credentials. It's actually offensive to real service members who actually sacrificed for this country. Thornhill looks at Reese with open contempt now, all pretense of judicial neutrality abandoned. I've seen men like you before. You probably served, maybe for a couple of years. Maybe you washed out. Maybe you were dishonorably discharged for incompetence or cowardice. And now you walk around pretending you were some kind of hero to get sympathy and spare change from people who actually respect the military. Reese's expression doesn't change, but his next words carry weight that silences the room. I served 23 years, 4 months, and 11 days. I received 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Silver Star. I was wounded in action 5 times across 3 theaters of operation. I lost 16 men under my direct command and carry every single one of their names. I speak 4 languages fluently and 2 more conversationally. I can field strip 43 different weapon systems. I've operated in 17 countries, 14 of which remain classified. And I have never, not once in my entire life, asked for anyone's sympathy or charity. The silence that follows is different, heavier. The kind of silence that comes when people realize they might have made a terrible mistake. Judge Thornhill's face is dark red now, a vein pulsing visibly in his temple. You want to play games with this court? Fine. I'm adding contempt of court to your charges. 6 months concurrent with whatever sentence you receive for the assault. Marshal Rodriguez, escort Mr. Commander back to... The courtroom doors open. A young federal marshal enters, walking quickly, his face pale and tight with tension. He approaches the bench and whispers something urgent to Judge Thornhill. Thornhill waves him away irritably. Not now. Your Honor, it's urgent. Very urgent. I said not now. The marshal leans in closer, whispers more insistently, his words coming fast. This time, Thornhill's expression changes dramatically. The color drains from his face. He looks at Reese, then back at the marshal, then at Reese again. You're certain about this? The marshal nods, pulling out his phone to show something on the screen. Thornhill's hands shake slightly as he looks at whatever information is being displayed. Judge Thornhill sits back heavily in his chair, suddenly looking 10 years older. His hands shake slightly as he picks up his gavel, then sets it down without using it. We're taking a 15-minute recess, Thornhill says, his voice unsteady. Everyone remain in place. Do not leave the courtroom. Your Honor? Sarah Chen stands, sensing the shift in atmosphere. What's happening? Sit down, counselor. Just sit down. Thornhill exits through his chamber's door like a man walking to his execution, his judicial robes suddenly seeming too heavy for his shoulders. In the sudden chaos of confused murmuring, Reese stands perfectly still at the defendant's table. His expression hasn't changed. He hasn't moved. But Sarah Chen, who's now standing right next to him for the first time, notices something she missed before. His hands aren't shaking, his breathing is measured and controlled, and his eyes are tracking every exit, every person, every potential threat in the room with the precision of someone who's spent decades calculating survival odds in hostile environments. "Who are you?" she whispers. Reese doesn't look at her, his gaze still scanning the room in a pattern that suggests training rather than nervousness. Someone who should have stayed invisible. In his chambers, Judge Marcus Thornhill is on the phone with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the conversation is destroying everything he thought he knew about the case in front of him. There must be some mistake. The defendant is clearly homeless, clearly unstable. The voice on the other end cuts him off sharply. Yes, but his appearance suggests... Cut off again, more forcefully this time. I understand that, but I've already added contempt charges, and I've publicly... Oh God! Oh my God! He hangs up slowly, his hand trembling, sits down heavily in his leather chair, puts his head in his hands. His entire career is flashing before his eyes, every decision that led to this moment suddenly revealed as catastrophically wrong. His clerk, a woman named Patricia, who's worked for him for 9 years, knocks once and enters without waiting for permission. "Judge, the U.S. attorney just called on my line too. They're saying there's been a..." They use the words critical error and immediate review required. What's going on? What did we miss? Thornhill doesn't answer immediately. He's staring at his desk, at the files stacked there, at the coffee-stained calendar that still shows yesterday's date because he forgot to flip it this morning. Patricia's phone buzzes insistently. She looks at it, her eyes going wide with shock. "Judge, there are federal vehicles arriving. Multiple vehicles, high-level vehicles. I'm looking at the security feed and there are... That's a Pentagon staff car. That's a... Oh my God." She looks up at Thornhill with dawning horror. "Who is that man in your courtroom? Who did we just arrest?" When they return to the courtroom 3 minutes later, the atmosphere has completely shifted. Word has spread somehow. Through phones, through whispered conversations, through the mysterious communication network that exists in every public building. Something is happening, something big. The gallery is packed now, people crowding in from the hallway, standing along the walls, everyone sensing that whatever comes next will be historic. Every phone is out, recording. News vans are pulling up outside, alerted by someone monitoring police scanners or court schedules. Reese stands at the defendant's table, completely unchanged, still calm, still steady, still radiating that strange quality of controlled discipline that nobody had really noticed before because they were too busy laughing at his appearance. Judge Thornhill retakes his seat. He doesn't pick up his gavel. He doesn't speak immediately. He's stalling, and everyone in the courtroom can sense it, can feel his reluctance to continue with whatever comes next. The rear doors open again. This time, it's not a single marshal. 3 men in military dress uniforms enter, and the room collectively holds its breath. The first is a colonel, silver eagles gleaming on his shoulders. The second is a 2-star general, the stars on his shoulders catching the fluorescent lights. The third is older, silver-haired, carrying himself with the kind of authority that makes even federal judges stand involuntarily. 4 stars on his shoulders and enough ribbons on his chest to make him walking history. The general walks down the center aisle with measured steps, his footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. The colonel and 2-star flank him, their expressions professionally neutral, but their eyes taking in everything. They reach the defendant's table and the entire courtroom seems to stop breathing. Reese doesn't turn around. The general stops directly behind him. "Lieutenant Colonel Reese." Reese's posture shifts, barely but noticeably to anyone watching closely. His shoulders set differently. His chin raises slightly. His entire bearing changes from prisoner to soldier in the space of a heartbeat. "General Hawthorne." Reese's voice carries different weight now, different resonance. The general moves to stand beside him, facing the bench, and suddenly Judge Thornhill looks very small sitting up there in his elevated position. "Your Honor, I'm General Robert Hawthorne, United States Army Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is Major General Klein and Colonel Foster from the Judge Advocate General's office. We're here regarding your prisoner." Judge Thornhill's voice comes out hoarse, barely audible. I wasn't informed that the defendant had any military. You weren't informed because Lieutenant Colonel Reese's status is classified at multiple levels above your security clearance. The federal marshals who arrested him were operating on falsified intelligence that we're currently investigating. The charges against him are fraudulent and will be dismissed immediately. And your treatment of him over the past 40 minutes has been documented by 7 different agencies and will be reviewed by the Department of Justice. The gallery erupts in frantic whispering, phones recording everything, people texting furiously. Sarah Chen stands frozen beside Reese, her mouth slightly open, her entire understanding of the case shattered. General Hawthorne turns to Reese, his expression softening slightly. Permission to speak freely, Colonel? Granted, sir. You look like hell, Jonathan. Respectfully, sir, you should see the other guy. It's not quite a smile on Reese's face, but it's close. The first break in his controlled expression since he entered the courtroom. The general's expression softens fractionally, something like warmth appearing in his eyes. Marshal Pritchard is recovering in the hospital. 16 stitches, mild concussion, wounded pride. The window, however, is a total loss. Hawthorne turns back to the bench, his voice hardening again. Your Honor, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Reese served this country with distinction for over 2 decades. His record is exemplary. His security clearance is above your pay grade and mine. His combat record is classified. The fact that he's been living on the streets for the past several years is a failure of our system, not a reflection of his character or his service. He is a decorated officer who deserves respect, not mockery. I was told he was a terrorist suspect. Thornhill starts weakly. You were told nothing that matters. What matters is this. You laughed at a decorated officer. You mocked his service. You added charges designed to humiliate rather than serve justice. And you did it all while he stood there with more dignity and discipline than this court has shown in its entire existence. Colonel Foster steps forward, producing a tablet computer. The charges against Lieutenant Colonel Reese are hereby dismissed by order of the Judge Advocate General's office. Furthermore, the U.S. Attorney's Office is opening a formal investigation into how falsified intelligence led to his arrest and how the situation was allowed to escalate. Your role in prolonging his detention and adding spurious charges will be reviewed by a federal oversight committee. I was following standard procedure, Thornhill attempts. You were following your ego and your prejudices, General Hawthorne says flatly, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. This man commanded a forward operating base that processed over 7,000 combat missions. He coordinated air support, ground operations, and intelligence gathering across 3 provinces simultaneously. The decisions he made on a single Tuesday morning in March 2012 saved more American lives than you'll encounter in your entire career sitting up there on that bench. He held off an enemy assault for 4 hours while wounded, coordinating evacuation of non-combat personnel, and he didn't leave his post until every single soldier under his command was safe. 14 men and women are alive today because he refused to abandon them. And you laughed at him for claiming he commanded 10,000 troops. The general pulls something from his pocket, a metal case, dark blue velvet, official military issue. He opens it with deliberate slowness. Inside is a bronze star with V device for valor. This is Colonel Reese's 3rd Bronze Star. He earned it in Afghanistan in 2012. There are 2 more at home, plus a Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and commendations I'm not authorized to discuss in public. He left these behind when he left the Army because he was broken by what he'd seen and done. Broken by losing his family in service to his country. But his service stands. His sacrifice stands. And your mockery of that service is a disgrace to this court. Hawthorne sets the metal case on the defendant's table in front of Reese with ceremonial precision. You left this behind, Colonel. I'm returning it now with the respect it deserves and the respect you deserve. Reese looks at the metal for a long moment. His jaw tightens. His eyes glisten, but no tears fall. Sir, I don't deserve... You do, whether you want to or not, whether you believe it or not. Hawthorne's voice softens again. You served with honor, Jonathan. What happened after, the PTSD, the drinking, the homelessness? That wasn't your fault. The system failed you. We failed you. But your service stands and nobody gets to take that from you. Not even you. Tears are streaming down Sarah Chen's face now. Half the gallery is crying. The other half is recording everything, knowing they're witnessing something historic. Judge Thornhill looks like he wants to disappear into his chair, his face ashen, his hands gripping the bench. General Hawthorne addresses him one final time. Your Honor, I'm also here to inform you that the Department of Defense will be filing a formal complaint regarding this proceeding with the federal judiciary. Your conduct toward a decorated veteran, regardless of his current circumstances, falls below the standards expected of the federal bench. You will be hearing from the Oversight Committee. General, I sincerely apologize. If I had known, that's exactly the problem. If you had known his rank, his record, you would have shown respect. But you saw a homeless man and treated him as less than human. That's not justice. That's prejudice. And it has no place in any courtroom in America. Major General Klein steps forward now. Marshal Devin Pritchard is currently under investigation by the Department of Justice for assault on a restrained prisoner. He kicked Colonel Reese twice while he was handcuffed and compliant. The fact that Colonel Reese responded with minimal necessary force to stop the assault and then immediately surrendered voluntarily demonstrates more restraint and discipline than most trained soldiers could manage in similar circumstances. The marshal claimed, Thornhill begins. The marshal lied in his official report. There were security cameras in that alley. There were civilian witnesses. Marshal Cortez has already given a statement confirming that Pritchard initiated unprovoked violence, and that Colonel Reese's response was controlled and proportional. Pritchard will face federal charges. The bailiff, Officer Rodriguez, shifts uncomfortably near the side door. He'd been smirking and laughing 90 seconds ago. Now he's very carefully not making eye contact with anyone. General Hawthorne addresses the courtroom now, his voice carrying to every corner, ensuring everyone present understands the moment they're witnessing. Let me be absolutely clear for everyone present and everyone watching the recordings that will inevitably appear online. This man is a hero. Not because I say so, not because of his rank or his medals, but because when his country called, he answered without hesitation. He did it in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in places we can't name, and operations we can't discuss. He sacrificed his marriage, his relationship with his daughter, his mental health, and ultimately his stability in service to ideals larger than himself. The fact that he ended up homeless is our failure as a nation, not his failure as a man. He turns back to Reese, his expression showing genuine emotion now. Colonel, I'm here to offer you a choice. The Army wants you back, not for combat. You've given more than enough. But we need leaders with your experience training the next generation of officers. Fort Benning has a position open in their leadership development program. Full active duty pay and benefits, comprehensive medical care including psychiatric services specifically designed for combat veterans. No deployment requirement, home every night. You'd be teaching young officers what real leadership means, preparing them to take care of their people better than we took care of you. Reese is silent for a long moment, processing. My daughter, he says quietly. Emma, is she? We located her yesterday. She's 23 now, living in Portland, Oregon, working as an elementary school teacher. We made initial contact through appropriate channels. Hawthorne pauses, choosing his words carefully. She wants to see you, Jonathan. If you're ready. She said she needs to know you're alive and safe. The courtroom holds its collective breath. Reese's hands, which have been perfectly steady through everything, through arrest, mockery, humiliation, finally shake. Just once. Just slightly. Is she okay? Did I destroy her life completely? She's strong, like her father. She's built a good life. But she needs you in it, Jonathan. Sober, stable, present. Can you do that? Can you accept help this time? 30 seconds of absolute silence. The weight of years of choices, of consequences hanging in the balance. Then, barely audible. Yes, sir, I can do that. Then let's get you out of here and start the process. General Hawthorne nods to Colonel Foster, who approaches with official papers. Sign these, Colonel. You'll be released into military custody immediately. We have a car waiting outside to transport you to a VA residential treatment facility where you'll begin a 90-day intensive program. It's not optional and it's not negotiable. After that, if you successfully complete the program and maintain sobriety, the Fort Benning position is yours. Reese takes the pen with shaking hands, signs without reading the documents, decades of following orders overriding any hesitation. Judge Thornhill finally finds his voice again, though it's weak and hollow. The court. The court accepts the military's jurisdiction and dismisses all charges. Mr. Reese, Lieutenant Colonel Reese, you're free to go. That's Lieutenant Colonel Reese, General Hawthorne corrects one final time, his voice sharp. And he was always free, Your Honor. We just had to remind you of that fact. Two military police officers enter the courtroom, not to arrest Reese, but to escort him with honor. One of them is Master Sergeant Maria Diaz, a woman in her 40s with her own bronze star and purple heart visible on her dress uniform. She stops in front of Reese, comes to attention, delivers a perfect salute. Colonel Reese, sir, Master Sergeant Diaz. I served under you in Kandahar, 2011 3rd Battalion. You recommended me for sergeant when nobody else thought I was ready. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Reese returns the salute slowly, his hand trembling with emotion. Sergeant Diaz, you made Master Sergeant. I always knew you would. Because of you, sir. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished, started with you seeing potential that nobody else saw. Her voice cracks on the last words. Half the NCOs in my unit are where they are because you taught us what real leadership looks like. We never forgot that. And we never forgot you, sir. Reese's eyes glisten with unshed tears, his jaw working as he fights for control. Thank you, Sergeant. That means more than you know. General Hawthorne places a hand on Reese's shoulder. Come on, Colonel, let's get you home. Let's start the next chapter. As they turn to leave, Sarah Chen finds her voice, stepping forward. Colonel Reese, sir? He looks at her, this young public defender who'd been assigned to defend him, without knowing anything about who he really was. I'm so sorry I didn't fight harder for you. I should have questioned the charges more aggressively, should have investigated before accepting the official story. I failed you. You did what you could with the information you had, Counselor. That's all anyone can do. You treated me with basic human dignity even when you thought I was just another homeless defendant. That matters more than you know. He nods once, a gesture of respect between professionals. Thank you. The military escort moves toward the courtroom doors. The gallery parts like water, people standing, some out of respect, some out of shock, some because they simply don't know what else to do in this moment. Judge Thornhill remains seated at his bench, alone with his thoughts, looking 20 years older than he did an hour ago. As Reese reaches the doors with his escort, he stops, turns back one final time to address the judge. Your Honor? Thornhill looks up, his face pale and drawn. I don't need your apology, and I don't want your pity. But I hope you'll remember something. The next person who comes through those doors wearing dirty clothes and carrying hard stories deserves your respect. Every person who stands before you deserves to be seen as fully human before you judge them. That's what justice actually means. Then he's gone, walking out flanked by honor guard, leaving behind a courtroom full of people who will never forget what they witnessed, who will tell this story for the rest of their lives. 5 years later, Jonathan Reese stands in Emma's backyard in Portland, watching his 7-year-old granddaughter Maya run through sprinklers, her laughter bright and pure. He's 73 now, retired from his teaching position at Fort Benning after 5 years of shaping young officers who will lead better than his generation did. Emma approaches, hands him a glass of lemonade, leans against his shoulder. You did good, Dad. Mom would be proud. I hope so. I finally figured out what she was trying to tell me all those years ago, that being present matters more than being perfect. Maya runs over, soaking wet, demanding that Grandpa Johnny play with her. He sets down his lemonade, lets her pull him toward the sprinklers. laughing at her enthusiasm. 20 years ago, he was sleeping behind dumpsters. 10 years ago, he was in a courtroom being mocked. Now he's here, playing with his granddaughter, surrounded by family, finally present for the moments that actually matter. The video of the courtroom incident still circulates online, still goes viral periodically, still sparks conversations about how we treat veterans and homeless people, and anyone who doesn't fit our expectations. Reese doesn't watch it. He's too busy living the life it made possible, too busy helping other veterans through the nonprofit he helped establish, too busy being the grandfather and father he should have been all along. Recovery isn't dramatic. It's daily choices, small victories, showing up consistently for the people who matter. It's boring and difficult and absolutely worth it. That's the real story. Not the moment the general walked through those doors, but everything that came after. The slow rebuilding, the hard conversations, the therapy sessions, the daily decision to keep trying. That night, after Maya is asleep and Rachel and Emma are cleaning up dinner, Reese steps outside into the cool Oregon evening. His phone buzzes, a text from a young veteran he's been mentoring, someone struggling with PTSD and housing insecurity, someone who reminds him of himself 20 years ago. The text reads, "I made it through today without drinking. One day at a time, like you said." Reese types back, "Proud of you. That's how it works. Call me tomorrow." He sends it, pockets his phone, looks up at the stars. Somewhere, other veterans are struggling tonight. Some will make it through, some won't. He can't save everyone, but he can answer his phone. He can share his story. He can prove that recovery is possible. That's enough. It has to be. It is.